I noticed my wife dressed better for work on Wednesdays, so I followed her. And then what I discovered shattered the very foundation of a life I thought I knew. For years, I believed I'd built a home on trust, love, and quiet devotion. But sometimes betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers. And on one crisp Wednesday morning, curiosity led me down a road I can never unwalk. My name is Thomas. I was the kind of man who never needed extravagance. Elise, my wife, was my heart. And Dylan and Luke, our boys, were my pride. It started innocently, or so I thought. Elise had always been modest, calm, reliable. She taught English at a local middle school, and for years, her schedule was predictable. But a few months ago, she told me she'd been asked to cover for a colleague every Wednesday. An extra class. Nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't think much of it at the time. In fact, I was proud of her. I told her it was good she was being recognized for her reliability. But something about those Wednesdays began to feel off. On normal days, Elise wore simple slacks or jeans and soft sweaters, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She never fussed over appearances. But on Wednesdays, she started dressing differently. Carefully, elegantly. I first noticed it when she came downstairs in a navy blue blouse I'd never seen before, paired with fitted slacks and heels she hadn't worn in years. Her makeup was subtle but deliberate. Mascara to deepen her green eyes, a touch of blush. Her perfume, once familiar and soft, was replaced by something stronger, unfamiliar. I asked her about it once, teasingly, even lovingly. "You're looking extra sharp today," I said, raising an eyebrow as she twirled her hair in the mirror. She smiled almost shyly. "Well, I want to look professional. You never know when the principal might stop by." It made sense, but something in her tone didn't sit right. The next few Wednesdays, I paid closer attention. She always left around the same time, but now she lingered a little longer in the mirror. Sometimes she'd check her phone more than once before heading out. I caught her smiling once at a message, then quickly locking her screen. I didn't press. I wasn't the type to snoop. In nearly 2 decades of marriage, I never felt I had to. But the feeling grew, that gnawing instinct that something wasn't right. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't paranoia. It was a cold awareness building in the pit of my stomach, making it harder to sleep, harder to concentrate at work. I began second-guessing myself. Was I losing my mind? Was I so bored with routine that I'd started inventing reasons to feel suspicious? I tried to talk myself out of it again and again. I reminded myself of Elise's loyalty, the years we'd shared, the hardships we'd overcome. But there's a moment, one sharp, irreversible moment, when doubt becomes certainty. And for me, that moment came one crisp Wednesday morning. She walked down the stairs in a sapphire blue dress. It hugged her figure just enough to turn heads. Her heels clicked across the floor like punctuation marks. And the scent she wore, rich, floral, seductive, filled the air as she leaned in to kiss my cheek. "I'll be home around 7, she said, grabbing her keys. I managed a nod, but my heart was pounding. The second the door clicked shut, I stood frozen in the hallway. Then, without even knowing what I was doing, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I kept my distance as I trailed her through the city, staying 2 or 3 cars behind, palms sweating on the wheel. My mind raced with explanations. Maybe she was helping a friend. Maybe she was shopping before class. Maybe she was going to a surprise event. Anything but the ugly possibility I was beginning to fear. The route she took didn't lead to the school. That fact hit me like a punch to the gut. She turned down a quieter road, then another. I followed carefully, heart hammering in my chest. When she finally slowed and turned into a dimly lit parking lot, I almost slammed on my brakes. She parked in front of a discreet-looking motel. Not a hotel, a motel. The kind with curtained windows and hourly rates. My stomach dropped. I pulled over to the side and watched, paralyzed, as Elise stepped out of the car, smoothed her dress, and adjusted her purse. Then she walked straight into one of the rooms. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My world tilted in that moment. Everything I believed about my marriage, my life, shattered in silence. I sat there in stunned disbelief, unable to cry, unable to scream, just frozen. My wife, the woman I adored, had walked into a motel in the middle of a Wednesday wearing a dress I'd never seen before, for a reason I now feared I could no longer deny. And all I could think was, why? Why now? Why us? I didn't know what I'd do next. But one thing was certain, my life, as I knew it, would never be the same again. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, engine still humming quietly beneath me, as the reality of what I'd just witnessed began to settle like concrete in my chest. Elise had stepped into that motel like she'd done it before, like it wasn't something shameful or secret, but normal, routine. That dress, that perfume, the way she touched up her lipstick in the mirror before leaving, it had all been for someone else. Not a principal, not a colleague, a lover. I felt sick. My hands were numb, shaking against the steering wheel. Every part of me wanted to look away, to drive off, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't. I stayed right there, parked across the street, eyes locked on the door she'd vanished behind. Time lost all meaning. 5 minutes could have passed, or 50. My thoughts spun like a tornado. Memories of our wedding day, the birth of our sons, late-night talks in the kitchen, quiet Sunday mornings. All of it now smeared by betrayal. I don't know what made me reach for my phone. Maybe it was the need for something solid, something I could cling to when the inevitable confrontation came. Or maybe I wanted proof, not to hurt her, but so I wouldn't spend the rest of my life wondering if I'd imagined it. I switched the camera on and waited. Then the door opened. I sat up straighter, every nerve in my body tightening. Elise stepped out, laughing lightly, adjusting her hair as she held the arm of a tall, well-dressed man I didn't recognize. He leaned in close, whispering something that made her smile. She touched his chest, playfully, the way she used to touch mine when we were dating, the way she hadn't in years. My breath caught in my throat. The phone in my hand trembled, but I hit record anyway. The lens caught her face clearly, the motel sign in the background, the man, the way they looked at each other. She looked happy, relaxed, like she didn't have a husband, like she didn't have children waiting at home, like I didn't exist. I got out of the car. I don't remember turning off the engine. I don't remember crossing the street. I just remember the sharp sting of gravel beneath my shoes and the icy pressure in my chest as I walked toward them. Elise turned just as I reached the edge of the parking lot. Her expression froze. The color drained from her face in an instant, and her lips parted, but no sound came out. The man noticed me next. His reaction was instinctive. He let go of her arm and stepped back. A flicker of guilt, or fear, maybe both, passed over his features before he bolted for his car. Tires screeched a second later as he sped out of the lot without so much as a backward glance. Elise ran toward me. "Thomas, please, I can explain. Just listen to me." I didn't say a word. I kept recording for a few more seconds, then slowly lowered the phone, turned it off, and slipped it into my pocket. She reached for my arm, and I took a step back. Her tears started to fall. Fast, messy, desperate. "I made a mistake," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "It was just once. This was the first time. I swear. I didn't mean to hurt you." Still, I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear her voice anymore. All I could see was the image of her brushing her hair in our bathroom mirror that morning, the scent of her perfume in our hallway, her kiss on my cheek as she said, "I'll be home around 7. I turned around and walked back to my car. She called after me again, her voice rising in pitch, in panic, but I didn't look back. When I opened the door and sat down, it felt like I was sinking into water. I stared at the wheel, my knuckles white as I gripped it. Then I drove off, not toward home, but just away. I didn't know where I was going yet. I just needed distance. I needed silence. I needed to breathe. Eventually, I pulled over in a deserted rest area off the highway, shut off the engine, and sat there in the dark. My hands finally stopped shaking. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at me. My eyes were red. My face looked older. Worn. I'd aged years in an hour. I thought of Dylan and Luke. How could I go home and look them in the eyes with this burning in my chest? How could I sit at the dinner table like nothing had happened? How could I pretend Elise was the same woman who had once read bedtime stories, who had laughed with me over pancakes, who had stood next to me at the altar promising forever? I couldn't. I wouldn't. I knew I had to tell the boys. Not everything. Not the motel. not the man, but enough. They deserved honesty. And they deserved a father who stood by his convictions, who didn't hide behind a lie just to keep the peace. I turned the car around and drove home, not to fix anything, but to start breaking what needed to be broken. Because sometimes the only way forward is through the wreckage. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had nearly dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn that once felt like a symbol of comfort. The house stood still, glowing faintly from the warm lights inside. But to me, it looked unfamiliar, like a place I no longer belonged. I sat in the car for a full minute, engine off, hands locked around the steering wheel. My stomach churned, and my throat was dry, but I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let this secret rot inside me, not when it threatened to tear everything apart from within. I stepped inside quietly. The scent of dinner still lingered faintly in the air. Leftovers, maybe something frozen Elise had thrown in the oven before her extra class. The sound of the TV buzzed from the living room. Dylan and Luke were curled up on the couch, one with a controller in hand, the other halfway through a bag of chips. They were laughing, real, innocent laughter that punched a hole straight through my chest. I stood in the entryway for a moment, frozen again, not by indecision this time, but by the overwhelming dread of what I was about to destroy. Dylan was the first to notice me. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" he asked, eyebrows lifting when he caught the look on my face. I nodded, then shook my head. "Can we sit down for a bit? I need to talk to you both." That got their attention. They turned the TV off and sat up straight, their expressions shifting from carefree to concerned in seconds. I walked into the room and sat in the armchair across from them, the one I always claimed as mine during movie nights. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I tried to breathe, but the words caught in my throat like shards of glass. "I need to tell you something," I began, voice hoarse. It's about your mom." Their faces tensed instantly. Luke, the younger one, leaned forward. "Is she okay?" I swallowed hard. "She's fine physically, but there's something that's happened. Something I saw today. I followed her this afternoon. I didn't want to. I never imagined I'd do something like that. But something felt wrong. And I found out that she's been seeing someone else." Dead silence. Dylan blinked slowly, processing the words. Luke's mouth fell open slightly, but no sound came out. I could see their minds struggling to catch up, trying to make sense of something so outside the realm of what they knew. "She cheated?" Dylan asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw it with my own eyes. I didn't want to believe it. I hoped I was wrong, but I wasn't." Luke turned his face away, his jaw clenched tightly as tears welled in his eyes. Dylan just stared at the floor, hands folded so tightly his knuckles turned white. The weight of the moment settled on the room like a heavy fog. "I didn't tell you this to hurt you," I said gently, my voice cracking. "But you deserve the truth. And you deserve to know why I can't stay in this house anymore. Not after what I saw." Neither of them spoke for a long while. Then, Dylan looked up, his eyes red. "What happens now?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to stay at Uncle Jacob's ranch for a while, just to clear my head. I need time to think, to breathe. But I'll still be here for you. Always." Luke's voice trembled. "Are you divorcing her?" I looked at him, my heart breaking all over again. "I don't know yet. Right now, I just know I need space. I need to protect myself, and you too." I stood up and went to my room, forcing myself to move one step at a time. I didn't pack much, just a duffel bag with a few clothes, some essentials, and the worn photo of all four of us at the beach, from when the boys were little and Elise still looked at me like I was her world. When I came back downstairs, the boys were still sitting there in silence. I knelt in front of them, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "You two are the most important people in my life," I said, struggling to steady my voice. "No matter what happens between me and your mom, that will never change." Dylan nodded slowly. Luke wiped his face with his sleeve. I hugged them both tightly, holding on to them as if letting go might break me completely. Then I stood up, walked to the door, and paused for one final breath. "Take care of each other," I said softly, and then I stepped outside, letting the door close behind me with a final, muffled click. The drive to the ranch felt endless. Darkness swallowed the road, and I let the silence wrap around me. With every passing mile, the distance between me and the life I'd known grew. I felt like a man untethered, drifting from a world I thought was secure into one filled with uncertainty and pain. And yet, beneath the heartbreak, beneath the tears I couldn't stop from falling, a small, quiet voice whispered something I wasn't ready to hear just yet, but couldn't ignore. This is not the end. It's the beginning. The first night at Uncle Jacob's ranch was long and sleepless. I lay on the guest room bed staring at the wooden ceiling, the distant creak of trees outside, the sound of crickets chirping, and the occasional rustle of a horse in the nearby stable. Peaceful to anyone else, but inside me, there was a storm. I couldn't stop thinking about the boys. Dylan's teary silence, Luke's trembling voice, the way they had looked at me, not just hurt, but confused, betrayed by a reality they never saw coming. And Elise, God, even now, part of me wanted to believe she would walk through that motel door alone, say it was a misunderstanding, that none of this was real. But it was. The next few days passed in a strange blur. Uncle Jacob gave me space, never asking questions, just keeping the coffee hot and the barn work light. He was a man of few words, but he could see right through me. I didn't say much. I couldn't. I just carried the weight of betrayal and silence. But while I tried to heal, the home I left behind was falling apart. Dylan called me on the third night. His voice was tight, his words rushed. Dad, something's wrong with Mom. I sat up immediately. What do you mean? She's different. She's drinking. A lot. The house is a mess. She hasn't made dinner in 3 days. Yesterday, I came home from school, and she was passed out on the couch. The TV was blaring. Luke tried to wake her, but she wouldn't get up for hours. My chest tightened with dread. Is she hurting you? No, he said quickly, but it's getting bad. She doesn't talk to us. She barely notices we're there. It's like she's not Mom anymore. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, my head in my hands. I'd hoped Elise would step up, face her mistakes like an adult. But instead, she was crumbling, and she was taking the boys down with her. In the days that followed, things got worse. The calls from Dylan became more frequent, short bursts of distress from a boy trying to be a man far too soon. Empty wine bottles piling up. Elise sleeping until noon. Dirty laundry scattered across the floor. Luke stopped talking altogether, retreating into himself. But nothing prepared me for what came next. It was a Friday night when Dylan called again, this time, whispering into the phone. She brought strangers into the house. I sat bolt upright. What do you mean? 2 guys, Dad. I don't know who they are. She came in laughing, drunk. They were carrying beers, blasting music. One of them broke a glass and laughed about it. Luke and I stayed upstairs. We're scared. I was already putting on my boots. What's happening now? I asked, grabbing my keys. They're downstairs. One of them was looking through Mom's purse. The other tried to open the hall closet. I think they're looking for money. That was it. That was the moment I felt my blood go cold. Dylan, I said, my voice sharp and clear, lock your door. Don't come out, no matter what. I'm coming. But before I could reach the car, Dylan's voice came back on the line, louder now, panicked. I told them to get out. I said I'd call the cops. What did they do? One of them lunged at me, but the other pulled him back. They left. They're gone now. I stood in the driveway, heart hammering, the phone pressed to my ear as silence settled over both ends. Are you okay? I asked after a moment. Yeah, he whispered. But Luke's crying. He's really scared. I felt powerless, like I had failed them all over again. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window at the ranch, staring out into the moonlit fields, fists clenched, heart shattered. I should have taken them with me. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving Elise space to explain herself, to make it right. But I was wrong. She wasn't rebuilding. She was unraveling. The woman I married was gone. And what terrified me the most was that she wasn't just destroying herself. She was burning down everything in her path, including our sons. I called Dylan the next morning. I need you to do something for me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Pack a bag. Just what you need. You and Luke. Keep it hidden. If anything else happens, anything, you leave. You come straight to the ranch. I'll be here. I'll always be here. There was a pause on the other end. Then, his voice came back, stronger than before. We'll be ready, Dad. As I ended the call, something inside me shifted. The helplessness didn't disappear, but it was no longer in control. I was still their father. And if Elise wouldn't protect them, then I would. No matter what. The call ended, but I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen, fingers trembling against the edges of the phone. I'd just told my sons, my boys, to prepare to run. And somehow, they hadn't panicked. Dylan had simply said, "We'll be ready." I wanted to believe that meant he was strong, prepared, unshakable. But deep down, I knew it meant something else. It meant he had been living in fear for far too long, and I had waited too long to pull them out. Days passed with painful silence. No calls, no texts. I told myself it was because everything had calmed down. But each night, I found myself sitting on the porch of Uncle Jacob's ranch, phone in hand, staring out into the dark fields, waiting. Then it happened. Just after midnight on a Thursday, my phone rang. Dylan's name flashed across the screen, and the second I answered, I heard the crack in his voice. "We're leaving. Now." I didn't ask questions. I only said, "I'm here." They had waited until Elise passed out. Again. Dylan had packed both their bags earlier that day, hiding them under their beds. He'd written a letter, short, firm, final. I imagined his handwriting shaking as he folded the note and left it on the kitchen table. Then they slipped out into the cold night, backpacks strapped tight, hearts pounding in their chests. The boys had no car. They walked. I later learned they hiked for miles under dim street lamps and the cover of darkness, every sound making Luke flinch. Dylan held his little brother's hand the entire way, whispering encouragement, pretending he wasn't just as terrified. They made it to the edge of town and caught the first bus heading west. No clear plan, just a destination, me. I stayed on the line the entire time, guiding them when the connection didn't cut out, counting their stops, tracking the distance. And when they finally stepped off that last bus, shivering and exhausted, I was already waiting at the old dirt road where the gravel met the edge of the woods. I saw them first, two figures, side by side, illuminated by the bus's departing headlights. Dylan's face was pale, drawn tight with tension. Luke was clinging to his older brother's arm, barely keeping his eyes open. And when they spotted me, they both broke into a run. I ran too. The moment we collided, I dropped to my knees and wrapped them in my arms, clutching them tighter than I ever had before. Dylan's breath hitched, and Luke burst into tears against my shoulder. We didn't speak. We just held on. When we reached the ranch house, Uncle Jacob opened the door without a word. He simply stepped aside, letting the boys in with a nod and a soft pat on the back. He'd been expecting this moment too. He had rooms prepared, hot food ready. The fireplace was already crackling in the hearth. That night, as they ate quietly and warmed themselves by the fire, I looked at their faces, worn, too pale, too young for this kind of pain. And I hated Elise. I hated what she'd become, what she'd allowed our home to turn into. But more than that, I hated myself for not acting sooner. I should have taken them the night I left. I'd underestimated the damage she was capable of. I'd thought there was still some version of the woman I married left inside her. I was wrong. After dinner, I helped them settle into a small guest room. One bed each, flannel sheets, warm blankets, and a soft lamp by the nightstand. I stayed until they fell asleep, watching their chests rise and fall, listening for the nightmares I feared would come. But they didn't. That night, the ranch became our home. And back in that cold house we had left behind, Elise woke up to find silence. She staggered through the halls, confused by the emptiness, until she reached the kitchen. There, on the table, lay Dylan's letter, written in a tight, determined script. "Mom, we tried. We really did. But this house doesn't feel like home anymore. You don't see us. You don't hear us. We're going to find Dad. We need to feel safe. Please take care of yourself. Try to be the mom we remember. We still love you. But we have to go." The note shattered her. She called me that night. 10 times, maybe more. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not after what the boys had endured. She had burned every bridge and left our sons to pick through the ashes. But while Elise sank further into regret, we began to rebuild. Slowly, carefully, we planted new roots in this place where the air was clean and the pain was still, for now, held at bay. I didn't know what came next, but I did know one thing. My sons were safe, and I wasn't going to let anyone hurt them again. The following days at the ranch felt like a dream stitched together with moments of relief and undercurrents of deep exhaustion. Dylan and Luke, though safe, carried the trauma of what they had endured like invisible scars. They didn't speak much at first. They didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, sacred, like we all understood something had been broken that words couldn't fix just yet. I watched them carefully. How Dylan always made sure Luke ate first. How Luke clung to his older brother's presence like it was the only anchor in a sea of chaos. I let them sleep in. I didn't push. I just let the ranch and its rhythm work their quiet magic. Uncle Jacob, as always, never asked questions. But I caught him watching the boys sometimes with a soft look in his eyes, as if he was silently grieving for what they had lost. One morning, I heard laughter. Not loud, not unrestrained, but laughter. Luke was chasing a stray chicken around the yard, and Dylan was filming it with his phone, chuckling under his breath. It was brief, but in that fleeting sound, I felt hope flicker again. It was the first crack of light in weeks of darkness. And that's when she arrived. Her name was Marin. It was late afternoon, and I had just returned from a supply run to the nearby town when I saw her on the side of the road, waving both arms, eyes wide with urgency. A little girl stood beside her, maybe 5 or 6 years old, clinging to her leg with tear-streaked cheeks and wind-tossed golden hair. I slowed down immediately and rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" I asked. Marin's voice quivered with relief. "Please, we've been walking for hours. Someone left us here. We don't know where to go." There was no hesitation in my mind. I saw something in her eyes that I knew too well. Fear, exhaustion, and a desperate need for safety. I nodded. "Get in." They didn't have much, just a small, worn-out duffel bag and the clothes on their backs. The little girl didn't say a word the entire drive. Her arms wrapped tightly around her mother's waist. Marin thanked me again and again, her voice soft but sincere, laced with an accent I couldn't quite place. When we arrived at the ranch, she looked around as if she had just stepped in a sanctuary. Uncle Jacob welcomed them without pause, offering blankets, food, and a place to rest. That night, as we all sat around the table, Marin shared parts of her story. She had come to the country for a better life, but had been taken advantage of, misled, and finally abandoned. Her daughter's name was Elia, quiet, bright-eyed, and clearly far older in spirit than her years should have allowed. I listened closely, but more than her words, I noticed how she moved, how gently she spoke, how she kept glancing at her daughter, checking if she was warm, if she had enough to eat. Marin carried a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't announce itself, but reveals itself in how someone cares for others. In the days that followed, she didn't just rest, she worked. She helped clean, cook, feed the animals. She braided Elia's hair in the mornings and sang to her in the evenings. She brought a softness to the house that had been missing for so long. And slowly, Dylan and Luke began to open up to her. Luke adored Elia. They became inseparable, two children who had been forced to grow up too quickly, now rediscovering play in each other. Dylan, though guarded, started helping Marin with small chores, offering tools, showing her how to fix the chicken coop latch. I watched all of this unfold with quiet awe. I didn't understand it at first, this warmth I felt in Marin's presence. But one day, while I was repairing a fence at the far end of the pasture, she walked toward me with a glass of water in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly as she handed it over. "Thank you," I said. She hesitated, then looked up at me with tearful eyes. "No, thank you, Thomas. You saved us. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped." I was silent for a moment. Then I replied, "You saved something here too." Our eyes locked, and in that moment, I felt it, something shift inside me. Not just gratitude, not just admiration, something deeper, something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. But I wasn't ready to call it love. Not yet. That evening, as I stood under the porch light watching the stars flicker in the night sky, Uncle Jacob walked over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You know," he said, "some people come into our lives to teach us a hard lesson, and some come to help us heal from it." I didn't respond, but I knew exactly who he meant. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken. I felt steady, and I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst days were behind us. Time at the ranch began to stretch into something soft and healing. The boys found their rhythm. Chores in the morning, schoolwork in the afternoon, laughter by the fireplace at night. Marin became an inseparable part of our lives. Her presence soothed us in ways I hadn't thought possible. And little Elia, her joy was contagious. Her giggles filled the spaces in our hearts that once ached from loss. I found myself smiling more, breathing easier. The pain of betrayal hadn't vanished, but it no longer ruled my every thought. Marin and I spent more time together, fixing up the barn, cooking, sitting on the porch at sunset just talking about life, parenting, dreams we'd once had and thought we'd lost forever. There was no rush between us, no pressure, just a quiet understanding that we were both survivors, walking out of different kinds of storms. Then came the day that turned everything upside down again. It was during our annual ranch celebration. We'd started the tradition just months ago, a way to mark a new beginning. Friends from nearby farms, townsfolk, a few old colleagues of Uncle Jacob's, they all gathered on the ranch. The place was filled with music, the smell of grilled food, and the sound of children running barefoot in the fields. It was the kind of joy I never thought I'd experience again. I was helping a guest with one of the horses when I felt it, that chill, that instinctive jolt that something was off. I looked up and froze. At the far edge of the crowd, standing near the fence with a look of uncertainty and quiet shame, was Elise. My breath caught. For a moment, I questioned whether she was real or just a ghost conjured by old wounds. But no, there she stood, her frame thinner than I remembered, her hair grayer, eyes sunken from months of emotional decay. She looked older, defeated. She clutched a small purse to her chest, her gaze locked on me. I hadn't seen her since the night I left. I didn't know she even knew where we were. I started walking toward her. Each step stirred up 1,000 memories, both good and terrible. I saw flashes of our wedding, the birth of our sons, the motel door, the phone shaking in my hand, the tears on Luke's face, the silent rage that had once threatened to consume me. Elise lowered her eyes when I stopped in front of her. Her voice was faint. "Thomas, I'm not here to cause a scene. I needed to see you. And the boys. I've been sober for almost 2 years. I've got a job. It's not much, but I've been trying to make things right. I know I don't deserve anything, but I had to ask for your forgiveness. I can't move forward without it." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she reached into her purse with shaking hands, pulling out a folded letter. "I wrote it all down," she said. "Everything. No excuses." Before I could respond, Dylan and Luke appeared at my side. They had seen her too. The silence that followed was unbearable. Elise turned toward them, her eyes filled with regret and longing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything. For what I did to your father. For what I put you through. I ruined everything, and I can't undo it. But I needed you to hear me say it." Luke stood motionless, jaw clenched. Dylan looked at me, his expression unreadable, then gave the slightest nod. I turned back to Elise. "Let's talk. Over there." We walked to the back of the barn, away from the party, from the eyes of strangers. What followed was raw, brutal honesty. Elise confessed everything. Not just the affair, but the spiral that followed. She talked about the nights she cried herself to sleep, the shame, the loneliness, the empty apartment. She didn't ask for sympathy, only the chance to speak her truth. And for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years, genuine remorse. When it was over, I looked at her long and hard. "We forgive you, Elise. Not for you, but for us. Holding on to hate only keeps us trapped. We've moved forward, and I hope you do too." She broke down, nodding through her tears. She embraced the boys, awkward, emotional, brief. Then, with a heavy heart, she turned and walked away, leaving behind the wreckage she had once created and the family she had nearly destroyed. As I stood there with my sons, the sun began to set behind the hills, casting golden light across the fields. Marin approached quietly, Elia skipping behind her. She didn't say anything, just slipped her hand into mine. And in that moment, I realized something I never thought I would. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freedom. After Elise walked away that evening, fading into the distance like a painful chapter finally coming to a close, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was something deeper, something quieter. Peace. A peace I hadn't felt in years. I stood there with Dylan and Luke beside me, Marin's hand in mine, Elia giggling a few steps away, chasing a butterfly beneath the amber sky. And I knew, in that exact moment, we were free. Not just from Elise's betrayal, but from the weight of the past that had hung around our necks like an anchor. We had survived the worst of the storm. And now, we were standing in the sunlight. Life didn't magically become perfect after that, of course. There were still quiet nights when the memories crept in. Still times when I saw a certain shade of blue and remembered the dress Elise wore the day everything changed. But the difference now was, I didn't drown in those moments anymore. I let them pass, like clouds in an otherwise clear sky. Maren became more than just a gentle presence in our lives. She became the glue that held the pieces of our broken family together. She never tried to replace Elise in the boys' eyes. She simply showed up, every morning with warm coffee, every evening with patience, kindness, and the kind of quiet strength I had come to cherish. Luke adored her. He began to call her Maren Mom on his own, which made her eyes well with tears the first time he said it. Dylan, who'd been slower to trust, finally sat beside her one day and told her about the night those strange men were in the house. She just listened, didn't interrupt, didn't press, and when he finished, she hugged him tightly and said the words he needed most to hear. "You're safe now." Months passed, and the ranch blossomed with life. Maren had a knack for hospitality, and before long, we'd turned the ranch into a quiet getaway for guests looking to escape the noise of the world. We didn't advertise it. We didn't need to. Word spread on its own. People came for the scenery, but they returned because of the feeling. Peace, warmth, home. Elia helped Maren in the kitchen, handing out cookies with a grin wide enough to light a room. Dylan and Luke helped me with repairs, with feeding the animals, and later with welcoming guests. They took pride in what we were building, not just a business, but a new life, rooted in love and truth. And me? I found myself waking up every morning with purpose again. I'd sit on the porch with Maren before sunrise, a mug of hot coffee warming my hands, her head resting gently against my shoulder. We'd talk about everything and nothing, what chores needed to be done, how fast Elia was growing, what the clouds looked like that day. There was no need to fill the silence. Just sitting beside her made the world feel whole. Then one afternoon, while we were walking along the edge of the property, I stopped beneath the old sycamore tree, the one that overlooked the fields and the hills beyond. I turned to her, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. "I need to tell you something," I said, taking her hand. She looked at me with those steady, compassionate eyes. "Okay, you saved me, Maren. Not just the day I found you in Elia. Every day since. You brought light into my life when I thought I'd never see it again. And I love you. I love you more than I ever thought possible after what I went through." Her breath caught, and for a moment, she didn't say a word. Then her lips curled into a soft smile, tears glistening in her eyes. "I love you too, Thomas," she whispered. "And I want to stay with you, with the boys. Always." We married a few weeks later. Nothing grand. Just family, a few friends, and the endless sky above us. Dylan and Luke stood proudly by my side. Elia scattered wildflowers down the path as Maren walked toward me in a simple white dress, her hand clutching mine at the altar like she'd never let go. That day wasn't just about love. It was about redemption, about choosing hope, even after heartbreak. Years have passed since then. The pain has faded, but the lessons remain. And sometimes, late at night, I find myself walking beneath the stars, alone for a while, just listening to the wind through the grass. I think about how close I came to losing everything, how betrayal once nearly destroyed me. But in that wreckage, I found truth. I found resilience. I found the courage to rebuild, not just for myself, but for the ones who needed me most. And I learned something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's strength. It's the power to let go of pain, to open the door to something better, something real. Because sometimes, we have to lose the life we thought we wanted to find the one we were always meant for. Looking back, I've come to realize that life isn't defined by the betrayals we endure, but by how we rise after them. The pain Elise caused didn't destroy me, it woke me up. It reminded me that even the most stable life can shatter in a moment, and that we must have the courage to rebuild when it does. For those of us in our later years, the lesson is simple but profound. It's never too late to start over. Never too late to protect your peace, choose yourself, and embrace new beginnings. Holding on to anger only poisons the soul. Forgiveness, though difficult, frees us to heal, not for others, but for ourselves. We must listen to the quiet instincts life gives us, even when they're uncomfortable. And above all, we must never forget our worth. I thought my story ended the day I drove away from the life I built. But in truth, that was just the beginning of a deeper, more meaningful chapter, one filled with love, family, and peace. No matter how old we are, we still have the right to happiness and the strength to fight for it.